Good morning, you awesome, amazing person. This is Jaina, waking up and recording a video. My wife just asked, wait, you're going outside to record another video? How many of these things do you have? And I said, if you followed along the Just Jaina YouTube channel, you'd see I have 26 or so. I think this will be number 27. And the topic for this one, as the title says, I always say things that are obvious only because I don't know how to get into gear. Okay, the topic is autism. My autism diagnosis. And the things I discuss in this video are coming from my perspective, my singular perspective, because especially when it comes to the world of autism or transgender issues for that matter, everyone has a different experience. The famous saying goes, if you know one person with autism or one person who identifies as transgender, you only know one person. You don't know everyone. Everyone's experiences will differ greatly, and my experiences are no different because they are different. And it wasn't even a topic in my life until a few years ago when I was diagnosed and when I went through my whole discovery process in that department. Start off by saying that autism and transgender as general diagnoses or conditions share so many similarities. Coming from the world of autism and being heavily involved in that world of online activism and understanding and education and helping the world see autism through a clearer lens, going from that to my whole transgender gender dysphoria and gender concerns, gender ambiguities. One author calls it gender incongruence because not all sides are equal. Those two communities have been so similar. I found equal levels of family in both. So what I will tell you today is a story of me throughout the years. And I will kind of skip really fast, hopefully, through the first phase of the journey and arrive at where I'm at now. And as well as my diagnosis process, which is unofficial. So I don't have a paper to say, hey, I have autism, except for a little note on my doctor's record showing that I am. But anyway. Yeah, I'm not official, so if you only listen to official people talking about issues, then I'm not the person to listen to. But if you want to hear some stories and thoughts, I'm here. I'm your gal. So I'm taking a moment to breathe. It all started in childhood. And what I am about to say in childhood and teenage years and early 20s is pulling from a very long-term memory. So the details are hazy. Some details are very sharp. First, autism, what is it? There's a lot of other people other than me who could tell you more officially what it is. I consider it a difference in how the brain receives and responds to information. And that information could be emotional, physical, spiritual, romantic, but mostly it's social because humans are social creatures. And we interact with one another. It's impossible to live in entire isolation. So the social aspect is the most focused on aspect, as well as social behaviors, or behaviors that you exhibit around other people. And those behaviors might be personality-based, they might be emotional, and they might be physical. And a diagnosis will likely include all of those aspects, but focus on one or the other because everyone's different and everyone has a bigger slice of their own personal pie chart or Venn diagram. In childhood, my only symptoms that I recall and that my parents tell me were repetitive symptoms such as rocking back and forth, humming to myself for hours on end, moving my body, moving my hands over and over and over. And those are behaviors called self-stimulatory behaviors, or stimming. They are an outlet. If you could think of a locomotive steam engine train and how it has to hiss out extra coal smoke and it has that psst. Like, that's kind of what stimming is that excess of extra tension. Or if you're familiar with street racing and you know those turbo or supercharged engines have that hiss when they shift gear and it lets off all that extra tension. I don't know the physics behind that or what exactly that noise is, but I do know it's releasing that built up tension. That's stimming, and that's a regular everyday behavior for someone on the autism spectrum, is the self-stimulatory behavior. There is a different kind of release of tension, and that is called a meltdown. And that's when the tension builds up too much, where stimming wasn't enough, it's gotten worse, and you go through this explosion or implosion of excess energy and stimulation. So as a child, I had these repetitive behaviors, the humming, the rocking back and forth. So I would sit on all fours like a dog, and I would just rock back and forth. Like, I'm not going to show you now, but I'd rock back and forth and I would just hum, and my parents didn't know what that was all about. I believe they did say at one point in my life, we thought you had autism, we're glad you did not. Well, autism doesn't go away, and I think they were imagining this behavior to be very autistic-like and go away over time, and it does not. As you will learn from my story, there are many like me who have really severe symptoms early on in life, but then they seemingly disappear as the years pass. That is not that you get better at it, it's not that you get cured, it's that you learn to put on masks to behave in such a way that others expect. I would also be morbidly afraid, deathly afraid of random things. One vivid memory I have, which is my first ever memory in life, was going into a Sizzler restaurant. They're a semi-popular food chain in America, very 1980s style, and this specific restaurant had large African fans on the walls, and the fans would wave up and down like this. I was terrified of them. As soon as my parents brought me into the restaurant, I was young enough so that they had to hold me. I saw these fans and I had a meltdown. I started screaming, crying, flailing. I was deathly afraid of them, and my parents didn't know what was going on. They didn't see the fans, so they had to take me out of that restaurant and go eat elsewhere. It was that bad. And that's how that memory is very isolated and specific, because I remember seeing the fans, freaking out, my parents trying to comfort me, and leave. My memories before and after don't exist, because it was that one high-powered emotional memory that got encoded into my long-term memory. And as I like to educate people, emotional memories are encoded long-term, and less emotional or less intense, less vibrant, less colorful memories don't get priority because they're just regular everyday experiences. It's impossible for us to remember every single thing in life, unless of course we have like a savant syndrome where we remember aspects of every day, such as the weather. Those are the only ones I could recall right now from my early childhood. I was always on edge. I was always super shy. I always had a hard time speaking. And in fact, I didn't speak much early childhood and teenage years. I did kind of lift in my, from about the age of 6 to 10, I did kind of get better in life, so to speak. I became more boy-like. Like, I finally behaved like a little boy. And that's when that's when my parents thought, okay, he's out of that phase. I'm using he because I reference myself before my transition as he. Sometimes I'll use she. It doesn't matter right now. I mean, I know I'm a girl right now, but in the past I was a self-identified boy. I refer to as such. Teenage years were bad. One of my dysphoric behaviors and mindsets as a teenager was being so terrified and afraid of puberty. I'm trying to see if like there's someone listening to my conversation here. I'm like right next to the fence, and sometimes I worry like the neighbors are like listening. I don't know. Okay, so as a teenager, I feared puberty so much, I told my parents, take it away, I don't want it. I saw all the other boys changing, and they were growing armpit hairs, their voice was cracking because they were getting a deeper voice, they were more aggressive, and they praised their puberty, puberty developments. I was afraid of it. I didn't want that. I wanted to remain the same boy I was. That was, so puberty was very troubling for me. After puberty, I just shut down altogether. I stopped talking. I lost that joy and energy and vibrancy that you kind of see for me right now. And I became a rock or something that stays on the ground and doesn't move or speak. I holed myself up in my room for pretty much the entirety of my teenage years. I would only get out of my room to go to my friend's house, my friend David's house. Hopefully you'll meet him someday. And I would stay there for 2 weeks at a time, and we played video games and Final Fantasy most of the time. I got into an MMORPG, which was called, at the time, Asheron's Call. It doesn't exist anymore, I believe, but I got into this MMO, which was before World of Warcraft came out, and I spent 3 years on that, and I clocked like 20,000 hours or so. It was insane. I was playing so much, and that was my outlet. And I'm glad I had that outlet, because as an autistic teenager, life was scary and difficult, and I was so troubled. So to have those intellectual objects of attention really saved my life. I was depressive, I was anxious, not bipolar. I was unipolar on the bottom side. I wasn't entirely miserable. I did enjoy life, but I went through so many struggles I didn't know how to put into words. I thought other people had these struggles too. And so I thought I was just weak and I needed to get stronger, but I didn't have the strength to get stronger. So I resigned to just being in my room all day playing games. I feel bad because I didn't form that strong connection with my family back then. They would come in my room and try to catch my attention. My sister would bake me cookies or make me treats and bring them to me. Here, big brother. And I'd just do something like, thanks, and continue playing my game. My dad would come up, and I have an amazing dad. My amazing mom, too. I have amazing parents. If you know that. If you don't know that, I talk a lot about them in my videos. They're the best parents ever. My dad would come up, and I'd be playing like this, and he would give me a hug from behind, where he would just wrap me from behind and say, here's one hug. And then he'd let go, and then he'd hug me again. And here's one other hug for when I can't give you any anymore. Even though I was just so shut down and in my own head, that touched me. No, Dad, you can't leave, you can't leave. He's like, I'm not leaving, but someday I won't be around. And I remember those hugs, and I still have them saved up. Such amazing parents. And it was their love that helped me get through my teenage years, as well as the love from my cousin Chelsea, who passed away in 2016. I would go to her house for weeks at a time. And we would also play Super Nintendo and have fun. Yes, video games were kind of like the focus of my life back then. And we would talk about depression, we'd talk about anxiety, and she helped me believe there were other people like me out there in the world who have the same struggles. She also helped me believe that I wasn't alone, that I wasn't the only person, that this was a mental difference, a mental condition that was a struggle and a burden, that I had strength in carrying that through life, that it's not that I was weak and not good enough as the other kids, but that I had something they didn't, an extra burden to carry. I love you, Chelsea, wherever you are. You are missed and you are loved. You have changed so many people's lives, and you have indeed changed my life. I like to believe that she's up there staring down, watching my transition unfold and smiling. Sometimes you can't help but think those things. I was greatly fearful. I had a fear of all things, and that fear would last my whole life, and that fear still does attack me. It feels like an ominous dark cloud of sorts where it follows me along. These things aren't autism specific, but these are things I felt. All things are intertwined and connected, so this is undoubtedly connected to my autism, but it's also something people go through who don't have autism. They might have a different mental condition. As I grew up, I would find idols, and these idols were usually people on TV because there wasn't YouTube back then, so I feel like an old person saying, oh, before YouTube, before PlayStation, I had these idols, and they served as anchor points for my own personality, which would be later called masks. I would develop aspects of their personalities, like fun-loving, goofy, extroverted people on sitcoms or whatever. I would say, wow, they're a fun-loving person. They make people laugh. They make people smile. They're always enjoying life and seeing the positive. I want to become like that. Even back then, before I had any words to explain, I knew there were aspects that I so deeply wanted because I knew they were a part of my personality, but they were caged and locked away. And they helped me, and I did grow into those aspects of personality combined with my own personality to make a new person. And these were masks. And I started developing these masks in my late teens when I was forced to get out of my room and go explore the world. My little note napkin keeps flying away and I have to catch it every time. So I had to enter the workforce and I had to enter college. I had panic attacks. Just the thought of going out in public and being among other people. I didn't have the safety and security of my room. When people would come over at our house, I knew if I went out to spend time with them, I could always go back into my room and escape, which usually happened after only a few minutes of being around other people. I was really afraid of everything. So, there was one class in specific that really helped me forge masks, thus my autism survival toolkit. Masks are an autist's best friend because they help them interact with the world, even though it's not something they would naturally do. You will see an example of a mask in people who have brilliant gifts that they perform in public. Yet, other than that, they are usually what they call low functioning, so they have more visible traits and symptoms of autism, such as mannerisms or movements or what they say or the sounds even that they just kind of like. All of those are forms of stimming. So you will see one person in their natural environment totally different than when they are performing, and that's a great example of a mask. My wife watches the America's Got Talent show, and there was one pianist and singer on that show who had autism and a low-functioning kind, where those repetitive behaviors and the like did not cease like they did for me. And as soon as he got on stage and played the piano and sang, it was a transformation before my eyes, and I couldn't help but stay in that room and watch it when it was on. Normally I just kind of pass in and out of our room while my wife watches shows. Well, I couldn't help but sit down and watch that, because that's a perfect, beautiful example of someone using their mask for good. I lost my train of thought. Hold on, please. One of these days I might start editing, by the way, so you're seeing the raw, uncut version. As soon as I get into better disciplines and schedules and time management and prioritization skills, I will start some editing, so you will see non-stop action from Jaina. Until then, you get these awkward pauses where I collect my thoughts. And I'm allowing myself these pauses while recording because in the past, if I paused, I would force myself to speak something, and usually I'd go off on so many tangents. So this is me really identifying that problem and seeking to fix it. So that is a silent pause, and maybe you should take a deep breath too. Might help. I'm gonna jump straight through my 20s. I've met my wife. I had plenty of distraction. Oh, I did forget a story. I'll get back to it. And my 20s were uneventful in that aspect. They were very eventful because I got married and, cool things happened in life, but uneventful in a sort of plot twisty way. until my late 20s. But going back, in college, I started out with 3 classes, and I was doing terrible in all of them. It was my fear that was keeping me in the back of the class. It was keeping me away from other people, so I wouldn't participate in group projects. I would just be stuck in this filthy mire of hate and despising everything. I was so negative until we got to a point in my intro to psychology course that talked about the Dr. Maslow, and he created the hierarchy of human needs. And at the top of the pyramid was self-actualization. So you have your basic survival skills, obviously, and then you grow and grow, like exploring love, exploring beauty, and all these things. And you get to the top where it's just self-actualization. You could also call it like being one with everything, being one in the universe, because that's what it feels like when you have a self-actualization moment. When you feel something in your gut, it's like this whirring positive energy, fluffy, comforting, exciting energy. And you just, in that moment, and this moment could last for days, hours, weeks, or just a few minutes, everything makes sense and everything is beautiful. I wanted that in life, and I realized I would not get there with anxiety, and I wouldn't get there clinging on to how I pushed away the world due to my whatever depression or ADHD or autism symptoms. I would push everything away. I didn't want that anymore. I told myself, I'm going to be the best possible version of myself. I'm going to live in this self-actualization. And gosh darn it, it worked. I moved to the front of the class, in all 3 classes. I started interacting with the students left and right. I started practicing small talk. I started acting out in ways that the person I want to become would act. And it worked. It worked. My transformation was very fast. I stuck my mind to it. I set my heart on it. And suddenly I was living that out. And that was a powerful tool that would help me survive my 20s. I want to talk about that just alone in a future episode, that whatever happened, that transformation, it was very similar to the transformation I experienced 3 to 4 months ago when I decided to give up drinking, transform my health, and be a better person. Very similar, except this was a more basic version of just, I want to be a better person to interact with others. And it didn't have to do with like, be a better person, because that's a core of who I am. I simply wanted to behave like a better person, if that makes sense. And please let me know if you have any questions about any of this, because I'm jumping a little bit here and there. So now to my autism diagnosis. This happened, I believe it was 2016. I opened my mind to learn about who am I and why do I feel the things I do. At that time, I didn't have any diagnoses except maybe depression. I admitted my need for help, that I couldn't get through life alone. I had behaved so good for like the first 4 or 5 years of our marriage. Things were going well, but the stresses of life were increasing. The water of life was getting hot, and I needed to do something, otherwise I would just wilt away and rot. So I sought professional help in the form of counseling, and that inspired me to journal. It was my idea to write like a 50-page paper and give it to my counselor therapist and say, fix me. Obviously that didn't work, and I did shorten it down to about 10 pages, which my therapist gladly read. And in that writing, I started to see patterns and themes play out. The autism symptoms of early child, my social behaviors as a teenager, my masks as a 20-something, and things started to make sense. And I saw these threads of patterns. And at first I thought, oh, wow, I'm an introvert. Then it was like, oh my God, I'm a highly sensitive person, or HSP. You are, if you're watching this, you're probably a highly sensitive person. So look up Elaine Aron. Last name is spelled A-R-O-N. She I think she developed this concept of the highly sensitive person, and that was what led me into my eventual autism diagnoses. So I was exploring those, I was exploring ADHD. I was literally trying to find a reason for why I behaved the way I did, and why I was starting to behave in ways... Quiet, birds! That won't help, but it helps me. I was trying to find an answer to why am I the way I am? And that's when all those threads of patterns and behaviors and thoughts and feelings all came together, and I finally had words to explain my symptoms. So I got online and I Googled some of those. And one of the first websites I landed on was an autistic blogger who had high functioning autism. By the way, the distinction between high and low functioning is very debatable. I will simply use low functioning to refer to it visibly impacts everyday life, visibly, and high functioning to be it doesn't seem to visibly impact your life, because people see you as outgoing and productive and successful, but they don't know the battles within. So essentially, high functioning is just you have a lot of masks and you use them. Low functioning is you don't have those masks, but it doesn't mean the internal struggle is any different. It could be, and I'm not saying that one struggle is more than the other. That's not how we autists think about it. It's like we all have autism. There's no more or less. We just express it differently. So when I read this blogger and he said, I have autism, he had autism, I'm like, wow, that's a word I've heard before. Because I had a friend about 8 years prior saying, hey, do you have Asperger's? Which was like kind of phased out as a term officially in the DSM, but it's still what people use. Like, I have Asperger's, I have high functioning autism, blah, 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 blah. Some could say that Asperger's is synonymous with high functioning autism, but I don't like using that. I like using autism because that's what it is. Moving on. By the way, autism is a spectrum. Obviously, they call it the Autism Spectrum, in that it has so many flavors. Transgender people have so many aspects and flavors, and that's a spectrum too, so that's another parallel. I brought up autism in my therapy. I had 2 therapists at the time. I brought up autism to both of my therapists at the same time, and both of them said, that's funny because I have been thinking about you possibly having Asperger's or being on the autism spectrum. And then the next session, they said, okay, I believe you are. I cannot officially say, but I believe you are. One of them actually dealt with families who had children, younger children on the autism spectrum. I was, I think, the first adult she had seen. And she said, what I've seen and heard from you, I would diagnose you if you were a child on the autism spectrum. As an adult, she's like, I don't have the official capacity to do so, but it's usually self-diagnosed anyway, so you can kind of go about your life as if this is true. Holy crap. It was like, it was a euphoric experience in understanding this is why, or partially why, I am the way I am. And it thrust me into this season of further self-discovery. However, at the time, I thought that would answer every question. I had lots of question marks, and I had lots of boxes that were unopened, and I finally got to open up all of them, and not all of the answers or explanations were there. But I marked that off as, well, I'll probably eventually discover it in the context of autism. I didn't realize that some of those unanswered questions had to do with my gender identity, which leads me to 6 months ago when I discovered that. So that's my story. Oh my gosh. I have a lot of struggles inside. I try to explain them as clearly as possible, and you see me always with a smile and goofy personality, but I deal with a lot of pain. That pain thrust me into alcoholism, which I almost died from. That pain caused me to push a lot of people out of my life who I'm trying to redeem and bring back into my life. And you might have a lot of pains as well. And you might not know how to show the world, I'm hurting, I'm hurting. Help me, I'm hurting. But it is so good to understand yourself. If you haven't already, I highly recommend you start a journal. Start with your earliest memory. Write it down in great detail. And then your next earliest. And make a series of journals or diaries or blog entries, however you want to call them, that storytell your life over the years. At first it will be difficult. You'll be hunting for memories and they won't come. But when you think of a memory and you start writing about it, others will come, I promise. I really recommend this because it'll, at the very least, help you understand who you were as a person back then compared to how you are now, and allow you to see the growth and transformation over the years. It'll also help you identify patterns and behaviors that never let up, that might be key or clues to what you are going through, whether it's a diagnosis or generalized condition, a personality trait. I'm a fan of the Myers-Briggs. I'm a fan of the Big Five. It'll help you uncover those identifiers. Understanding yourself is crucial in life, and I don't understand why other people don't understand themselves and don't care. I think understanding the world inside your head would help you interact with and kick ass in the world outside your head. But believe it or not, most people go through their whole life not really caring about what's between their ears. And to me that's sad, but that's only because I am that introvert. I am that highly sensitive person. I have a rich, deep, meaningful inner life, and I would have it no other way. It keeps me asking questions, such as, why do I behave the way I behave? Why do I have these desires? What causes me to fear so much? Why do I always act awkward in social settings? Why do I have a hard time remembering what I was talking about? Why do I keep staring out away from the camera recorder? It's good to know yourself. These last few years have been so eye-opening for me. It's like life finally started for me when I started asking those questions. So I encourage you to do the same. Like, tear yourself apart in a good way. Rummage through all that madness in your lobes. Ask yourself, why? Why? Who is Jaina? Why does Jaina do the things she does? What are her convictions? What are her struggles? What are her strengths? Did you know if you have a mental difference, you have so many strengths? Because a mental difference is simply a difference in how your brain parses and processes information. And that means you're a natural out-of-the-box thinker, or a bottom-up thinker, not compared to top-down. Or you see patterns in things. Or you think in images and visuals. Or like me, you think in emotions, and everything has an emotional flavor to it. When you discover these things, you'll be able to tap into your strengths so much more and see your weaknesses as hurdles that you jumped to make you stronger so that you can exhibit those strengths in life. And I'm going to make one more effort to see if I'm missing anything. I'm still quite tired, and I hope you were able to follow along. That's it. I think I covered everything. If you are wondering about autism specifically, if you think you might be on the spectrum, because it's heavily misunderstood, adults have a hard time getting diagnosed or even self-diagnosing. I encourage you to go to the Reddit subreddit, Asperger's, and feel free to ask questions. I found family in that community just as I found family in the transgender community. People on the spectrum are so, I've found they're so kind and friendly and loving because they see you as a fellow hurting creature trying to get through this crazy life. And it might help you understand the why behind why am I transgender. It won't answer it, but it might help you understand a bit more. And if you didn't know already, people are more likely to be on the autism spectrum as transgenders. And I'm not sure if that's like a causation correlation thing. Is it really the opposite? People on the autism spectrum are more likely to be transgender, or the other way around? Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Those details don't matter, but they're cool. Because if you can answer that question, you could realize, oh wow, if it weren't for my weird, out-of-the-box, quirky personality, I might not have explored my gender identity and become aware of it. Wow. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm just going to leave it there. I'm always open for questions. I know a lot of people might not see these videos for a while, but I'm always here, even if you see this a year after I publish. But if you do go into the future and see my latest video, please come back and tell me how I look in the future, please. Just kidding. Alright, this is Jaina Jaslyn. I really hope you enjoyed that long talk, and if you watch the whole thing, you get a gold star. I will deliver it by mail. Please pay shipping and handle it. Just kidding. Alright, bye. Have a wonderful day.